Okay, welcome. Good morning. Hope everyone is doing well. Thank you so much for being here this week at Google Next, and thank you so much for joining our session here this morning. Hopefully this is a productive 45 minutes for you in your busy schedules here today. We're joined by three very strategic and very important partners of Google Next, Google Cloud, I should say, at Next, which I'll introduce here in a minute and give them a chance to tell you a little bit about themselves. And we're going to talk a little bit about lessons from implementation for generative AI. So we've heard a lot about generative AI over the last couple of months and definitely over the last couple of days. And these three partners, I think, are at the forefront of what Google Cloud is doing in terms of getting these new technologies into production in the hands of our joint customers. So very excited for this session and look forward to the Q&A. So thank you three for being here. My name is Seth Siciliano. I run our horizontal ISV ecosystem team at Google Cloud. What that is we are responsible for the management of some of our largest and most strategic business application partnerships. I'm going to let Peter, Hugo, and Lars tell you a little bit about themselves, and then we're going to get into a fireside chat Q&A. At the end, we hope to have time for questions from the audience as well. So if we do run out of time, because we've got a strict clock here, we will happily meet in the hallway afterwards and answer your questions. So thank you in advance. Peter.
Hello, I'm Peter White. I lead our emerging products in AI at Automation Anywhere. And Automation Anywhere is a company that helps customers automate end-to-end processes with AI and automation across their systems. And we do that really for processes across their entire business, everything from front office, service, sales-based processes, all the way to back office, finance, HR, IT processes.
Thank you, Peter. Hugo?
So Hugo Sarrazin, I'm the Chief Product and Technology Officer at UKG. UKG is the combination of Ultimate Software, which is a HCM provider and payroll provider, and Kronos, which is workforce management. So you can imagine we do the usual clock in, clock out, compensation, performance management, recruiting, onboarding, et cetera. In terms of using technology, we've been using with Google since 2017 a lot of AI, traditional AI. We've got 2,500 models in production, and they touch 8 million people every day.
Okay, and Lars.
Thank you. Yeah, so I know you're struggling with the slides here.
Yes, sorry.
But this is me, right? So SVP and Chief Architect for OpenText. OpenText, we are a B2B company doing information management solutions and digital value stream management. So everything you need in order to manage your document, manage your customer relationships, doing your business transactions, managing your development lifecycle, managing your IT operations, and a lot of cybersecurity. As part of being the chief architect, I also own the AI strategy as well as the hyperscaler strategy. So that's very much in line with what we're going to discuss today, I guess.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lars. So again, just a quick 30 seconds on framing up what the conversation is going to be about. I think as we go back to last year's Next in August in San Francisco, there was a race to, I would call, PR and publicity. Everyone wanted to make sure that they were getting what their generative AI vision was out into the market, what that message was. What we want to do today is pivot from that message to the really product aspect of what a Gen AI strategy and vision really looks for. Automation Anywhere, UKG, and OpenText, in my opinion, are three of the foremost partners that have been able to take that messaging and really turn that into product and deliver that into the market. And so that's what we're going to focus on here today, is really the lessons learned from that. And so I just, again, thank you, the three, for your time today, and we'll jump right in. I wanted to start with maybe talking a little bit about how we scope for success, because I think that's really important to kind of have that success in mind when we start off. The first question is really, how can companies define AI products with clear objectives, measurable outcomes, and really the right level of complexity? And so how did your organizations really start that journey? And Hugo, I'll start with you.
All right, so to answer the question, I need to give you a bit of context. So we're really focused on the frontline workers in industries like retail, hospitality, manufacturing, healthcare. And they're, in many cases, overwhelmed in their day-to-day work. They've got a lot of unstructured data, unstructured information. Their experience with technology is often broken into silos. So we recognized a long time ago that this was a huge opportunity to use AI to facilitate a lot of their day-to-day tasks and change their experience. So we've focused our strategy, now this is the answer to the question, like we needed a product vision that kind of made it very, very clear how we were going to change the experience of these frontline workers. And we have a vision to make every place a great place to work for all employees, therefore with diversity. And we're embedding in each of our module, each of our product, the capabilities of AI, historically, and now Gen AI.
Great, thank you. Peter.
Yeah, I think this is something that we really focus on is what is the process, what are the key business metrics that a company wants to impact when they are using AI. And that's kind of the critical first step to making the right decisions and building the right things with AI. And so we look at that process. We think it's critical for our customers to really understand what the as-is state of their current use cases are. And so there's tools to do that. We have tools like process discovery. There's other mining tools in the market that help you understand that as-is state. And from there, it's really about how are you going to improve that for your users with AI. The other thing you mentioned around the complexity question when you're building these, I think we often are coaching our customers, working with customers in terms of where to start. And from a complexity perspective, we advise them, start with something rather well-defined, simple, where you can use AI or generative AI for a very specific task. Don't jump straight into a data science project where you need to train or tune a large model. Keep a person in the loop, a human in the loop, in whatever process you're building. Make sure you have monitoring in place to see how it's performing and improve it over time. And I think starting there for most customers is the right place to get some tangible value, and then obviously continue to iterate and improve from that baseline.
I mean, it's such a good lesson with the pace of change in this space and everyone's rush to get there, but that simple reminder of starting in a definable swim lane, achieving success, and then iterating from there. Lars, how about you?
Yeah, I think one of the keywords we should all remember is the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, don't panic. Because that's what has happened for many companies about a year plus ago, where people discover, oh, there's this generative AI, and what are we going to do here? It's going to change the world forever. We're going to die, or we're going to fly, or whatever, right? And so in OpenText, we happen to have been in the AI business for about 20 years. Before all of this craze happened, we had a hard time actually selling these solutions because nobody was interested, and yeah, it's complicated, and please go away. And that has completely flipped around, so there's a pull in the market now, which is great. We were part of inventing the concept of vectorization about 10 years ago, and it was almost impossible to sell because this semantic way of indexing, nobody understood it. Today, everybody wants it in the RAG architecture. So for us, it has been to say, okay, don't panic. There is now a new kid on the block called the generative AI, the LLMs, right? How can we add that into what we are already doing? And very much focusing on existing businesses and then sprinkle in the Gen AI dust on top of the solution. And so when it then comes to measuring, is this something that we will have success with? It's to some degree right now, it's about experimentation. Some of the solution is obvious. It will help. If you can do summarizations on your documents, we do a lot in document management. That's an obvious win, right? So let's just get it on, right? Let's get it embedded. And so that allowed us to move very fast and just add these extra things into the solutions.
Wonderful, thank you. We talk about trust in a lot of different concepts through the years and different types of technologies and different evolutions of our markets. But I think when we're talking about generative AI, trust is obviously critical here. So I'd love it if you guys could talk a little bit about how your organizations are thinking about how data quality, how governance, how compliance, how all of that leads into the level of trust inside of what you're building and how what you're building also helps evolve into responsible AI frameworks and how you guys are thinking about that moving forward. Hugo, maybe we start with you.
It's a great question. It's a complicated question. People get all enamored with models, and Google has a great model garden, and there's plenty of models there. But the reality is, it all starts with the right data and a deep understanding of how you can use that data and mode. So we spend a lot of time. We are creating what we call internally our people fabric, which is a mesh distributed set of data, so that we move away from these point solution and recognize that the value is when you bring things together. Because we're in the human capital business, having a representation, a digital representation of the individual, his or her context, is really, really important. And we're spending an enormous amount of time capturing the signals, making those signals available to the various modules or products that we offer. So it's central, that data piece. Now, to your second part of the question, trust is everything. And at this moment in time, there's a lot of hype, there's a lot of fear, and I think it is important for product players like us to really spend the extra time making sure we bridge that gap and build that trust. And there's a couple of things, at least we're trying to do. One is, make, as you mentioned, make the human in the middle, be the fail-safe, and then make it clear that that's always going to be there. Create transparency on where the data is coming from. And I love the anchoring capabilities and all that. And I think it's really, really important to do that. And I think the third one is a dialogue. I think you need to have a dialogue with the users to make them understand where this is going to make a difference, and do invest in the change management to build that trust.
We're going to come back to that concept here in a second. That's a really good point. Lars, how about you?
Right. So one of our core businesses, one of our big businesses around document management and information management. And so, and how we differentiated ourselves in the market, ignoring AI, has been about quality of data and life cycle of information management. So our starting point is to not risk that perception and reality in the industry, that you can trust us, that we understand and guard your data, which has also led us to have this mantra of saying, well, you need to bring the AI to the data. You don't bring the data to the AI. So this trust about it's locked down, it's follow the life cycle. We don't send around copies everywhere and do crazy kinds of indexing. So suddenly everybody can see everybody else's data because it's all part of this AI in some form, right? That has been extremely important. It has led to certain challenges as well. Some of the providers of the base models, we're not training our own models from scratch. We think partners like Google are excellent for that. And some of the potential other partners have this concept of send your data to us, you can trust us, right? And we'll send some results back. And that's really not the way we want to work, right? So having concepts like the Vertex environment, where there is a very clear delineation between what is Google doing in order to improve their models versus what is under our control, has been extremely important. But to the point about, well, we need to educate people around it as well. The ethics around how we are managing it. So it's been very important for us to actually write down what are the ethical guidelines that we are following. It's not only guidelines, it's actually something we believe in, like our partners' data is their data. It's not our data to do whatever we like with.
Sure.
It's one of the key tenets of many.
Yeah, fantastic. Peter?
Yeah, I think now that our customers and our company has really recognized the potential of these new technologies, especially the generative AI models, I would say every single conversation we have is about governance and compliance with our customers, or that's an element of every conversation, because it is so important now. Companies, they want to move quickly, they want to take advantage of all these new capabilities, but they recognize there is a potential to introduce risk to their business, and having a clear framework across their organization for how you can use it, who can use it, what models you can use, all of that is really top of mind. And I think, as you mentioned, having tools like Vertex AI, using our platform with Automation Anywhere, really help customers put the guardrails and the guidelines in place where they can use this responsibly. They know their data is secure. They know that it's not introducing risk, unnecessary risk to their business. And similar to your framework at UKG, we put out a responsible AI framework from sort of the beginning with our customers around some top-of-mind things they should focus on. First was around using models that you trust, using providers you trust like Google, making sure your data is secure, having guardrails in place. I think everyone kind of probably knows this, but you don't want to put just generative AI, raw generative AI in front of your users and hope they figure it out. Having kind of a clear guided experience for your users, having guardrails is critical. Human in the loop, which we talked about, is the third one. And then fourth is just having monitoring and a great visibility into what the models are doing so that you can make sure they're working as intended and you can improve them over time when you see opportunities or subpar performance that you want to go in and address in the products.
Sure. One of the reasons I think the three of you are so great for this conversation is because your technologies touch so many users inside of your customers, right? It's just every day they're using it. They're very familiar with your technology in your biggest customers. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that because you each touched on that user experience. So what are some of the strategies that you guys used to really gain that user acceptance? You're really seamlessly integrating this stuff into their workflows day to day. But really, how did you work to gain user acceptance? And what does that lead to in terms of some of the other conversations around responsible AI and ethics and things like that? Hugo, we'll start again with you.
A couple of things. The first one, AI is not for everything. So we don't start and say, like, we got a hammer and we need to kind of go around and apply that wherever we can. The second is, there are use cases where there's value for everybody. And let's focus on that and build the wins and get the end user or the employees, see that for them. I'll give you an example. If you're a retail associate and you're trying to get a shift, and then it comes up with an alternative shift that says, hey, by the way, this is closer to your home. Do you want to take this shift? This is easy change management. Yeah. This is super easy. So let's focus on those rather than to go after the fancy dandy stuff that may be a nice science project, but you're in the middle of a bunch of ethical, bias, training, regulatory. There's so many really cool things. So that's been our strategy, and we have not run out of use case. We got lots of opportunity in our products. So we're gonna keep mining that. That being said, when you do the rollout, you do need to explain to people and make it transparent what is happening. And some of these models, or some of the the way people deploy the models, it's all black box, and we think we can do better. So we're really pushing for explainability. I know it's hard, particularly now with Gen AI, but we need to give people a degree of confidence in an answer, or what were the driver of that answer, so that people can take a bit more control and comfort that this is not being done to them, but they're part of it.
It's about transparency, proactive. Lars, what about you?
Well, first off, I do think we need to recognize that we are still early on in the journey of using generative AI. So I tend to compare it to what happened with the .com bubble many aeons ago. I have gray hair, so I was part of it at that time. Crashed and burned and got some scars and whatever. But the reality was that when it all kind of collapsed a bit after 4 years of craziness, it didn't imply that it all went away. We all use the web all the time, right? But what we're using it for today is very different than what everybody imagined in the first couple of years of the craze of the .com movement. And that's the same that is happening right now with generative AI. So there are obvious places where we should use it, and as we go about, we can do this as well, we can do that as well, right? But there are also things that isn't for generative AI, that requires simpler machine learning algorithms, or just the if-then-else statements, and the existing workflows. They are good workflows. So understanding that is quite important, and the only way you can figure out if you're right-sizing it, not the only way, but one of the ways is to have a very tight dialogue with your consumers of these solutions. So we're having these dialogues. We have beta testers and various standard programs when you introduce new technology. Use the same mechanism, right? Fast feedback. Is it working? Is it not working? One of the bigger challenges we have is also to understand what is the commercial value at the end of the day. So how do we measure it, and what is the actual cost? And I think nobody actually understands what the cost of generative AI is, because, well, maybe Google actually do know it.
We're all learning. We're all learning.
Right. But the pricing models are under rapid evolution at the moment, and that implies that it's difficult to create clear business cases right now. But that shouldn't stop us from experimenting, so that we are ready with understanding it and then scaling it up.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We're going to come back to that in a few questions. Peter, what about you?
Yeah, I think I would echo a lot of the points that Lars and Hugo made. We really, we start with the business process, the user, what do they need, what can make their job better. I think in the early days, like you said, and we're still in the early days, but in the earlier days, a lot of the discussion was sort of technology up. What can this technology do? What should we do with this? And it was sort of a really, let's force this technology into people's workflows. But I think now that we've had a little more time and the dust has settled, people are starting to think back more in terms of what are the business outcomes, what are the user processes, how do we help them do their job better, how do we drive key business metrics. And so, then generative AI and AI just becomes another tool in your toolbox, very valuable one, but you bring it in where it's appropriate to achieve those business outcomes. And then for the user specifically, one thing I would add to what you guys talked about is, one of the things we've done and one of the things that's in our platform is a co-pilot capability. Everyone has co-pilots these days. But the way we've architected our co-pilot is that it can be embedded in any business application. And so what that means is you're bringing these AI workflows to the user. You're not taking them out of context into a different experience, a different application to use generative AI. And I think that's critical is, you want to create a seamless experience for those users. And you're not doing your job over here and then you go over here and do AI separately. So I think that's been one learning that's helped a lot with user acceptance and getting businesses to really start to adopt these technologies in their workflows.
Sure. We all know every project, every product launch goes perfectly as planned without any hiccups, changes, obstacles. But let's just suspend reality for a second. Let's talk about some unforeseen challenges, anything that came up unforeseen. Lars, maybe we start with you. What were some of the things that you guys learned along the way and some unforeseen challenges that came up that really changed how you guys were approaching this, and what types of tips and tricks did you guys develop?
Right. So we have about 8,000 developers. They're all being trained in computer science, which is not an exact science, but close, right? in the sense that if you do this and you have that input, then this will happen, and it's predictable, everything you do. We have a DevOps process set up that we have repeatable tests, and you only release to production if you pass all the tests, etc. Now that we start working with Gen AI solutions, repeatability goes out the window to some degree, right? Because suddenly the model today answered differently than it did yesterday, and now it's not really giving a good answer, but tomorrow it might give a good answer on a given test case, etc. So that needs to change the mindset of how you actually develop. It's kind of like you have a human in the loop, and humans are notoriously unstable, and the Gen AI is that human suddenly as part of the solution you're delivering, right? So that's one thing. And the second thing associated with that is that the large language models we had available 1 year ago, just 1 year ago, it's completely different than the ones we're using today, right? There's been so big evolution, and now it's Gemini, but actually Gemini 1.5 is significantly different than 1.0. It's almost like it's a different, well, it actually is a different large language model. It's just had the same name, right? So keeping up with that loop, even though we are DevOps oriented, etc., that requires a mental change for our developers and also for our consumers, right? We traditionally sell to business customers, and they have an install upgrade cycle that at best is every 3 months, but typically once a year. That doesn't work for this, right? So yeah, that's a big change.
Great. Peter, what about you?
Yeah, I would build off that point that you made, Lars, around sort of what I would say is non-deterministic nature of these models. And I think that's something, like yourselves and, a lot of us have been working with AI for a long time, and you kind of just take that for granted. But for a lot of people, that's somewhat surprising, or it's a new experience that something, is not going to work right 100% of the times, and that's expected. And so, there's a lot of adapting, coaching internally, customers, others around, this is how this technology works. This is, you should expect this. And then also designing the way you use it with that in mind. And so if you have a requirement that something's right 100% of the time, this is not the right technology to use for that necessarily. Or you have guardrails in place and you have a kind of process in place where you account for that. You have validation checks. And so we use a lot of document processing in our product too. We use some of Google's .ai products, our own extraction technologies. And built into that, we have the ability to add validation rules, compare against the system of record, make sure that the data is making sense, and then escalate to a person as an additional check in the process if needed. And so that's all there really to sort of manage the fact that these models are not going to be right 100% of the time. And so you need that sort of framework in place when you're using this for your business critical processes.
Great. Thanks, Peter. Hugo, what about you?
I think the biggest thing that stands out is, we're in the business of delivering software to our user, regular cadence, DevOps, continuous integration, this and that. But the last 12 months, we just had to find a bunch of new gears. The pace at which this is moving is incredible. And what we make as an assumption at the beginning of a product cycle, halfway through is already there's 6 announcements that have invalidated that. Google changed the model 16 times. It is the whole process by which we're building product. We're really having serious conversation internally. What do we need to rewire to be able to compete? In simple things like, what's the definition of done? Right? That has evolved in recent years. Now we include, making sure that the user uses it and it's instrumented and all that stuff. But now the definition of done is I need to make sure that I can avoid model drift. I didn't have a machinery to do that in the system right now. So there's new capabilities that we had to, bolt on to kind of support the speed of change and the new kind of products we're generating now.
A mentor who will constantly tell me to have firm beliefs, but hold them lightly. Because you don't know when you're going to have to change them. So, Lars, you mentioned ROI a little while ago, so I'd like to get back to that and maybe start with you and really just ask how you guys are thinking about measuring ROI of generative AI products and workflows. Obviously, it could be financial gains, but it could be other value as well. And what are you thinking about when you guys are building here?
Well, we're kind of looking at it from a couple of different angles. One being that they're just cases where the business case is so obvious that I don't even want to compute it, right? Because computing it is a lot of work and you try to put numbers on it, but you know that fundamentally it saves you money. You can get summarizations of your document. That's just very useful. So of course we need to do that, and everybody's doing it. So if you're not doing it, then you're not competitive even, right? So it's get on with life, get it implemented, get it running, right? So we actually don't try to make a business case because that would be waste of effort and will hold us back from making decisions, right? There is a degree, again, because we're in the first year of the craze, right, that you just need to kill the analyst and then just get shit done, right, and get some experimentation out. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is that traditionally, when you try to measure something, is that if you're living in a tailor society, you have your production lines, etc. It's very easy to time everything, and you can put KPIs on it, and you can optimize it. When it comes to knowledge workers, that's more complicated. If you have something like a developer in your organization, and I have 8,000, the span of the most productive developer versus the worst developer is probably a factor 10. What one guy can do in one day, another person, she can do it in, in an hour, right? And so what is the AI then going to help? You have to measure that individual, not as an aggregate, right? And it turns out in this particular case, and where we are trying to do some measurements, everybody is talking about a code generator AI will help you 40%. I think it's not 40%. I think that for some use cases, for some users, in some scenarios, it's 80%. In other cases, it's actually distraction, right? So, so we have to be very careful about trying to measure, because it becomes a science project more than the actual implementation.
Sure. Hugo?
Hey, I'm very aligned with Lars. I think we're at the moment in time, particularly around Gen AI, there are things you just need to do to be in the game. So we're participating, we're jumping, and there are things that everybody in our industry is going to have. We need to have it. So we're going to do, like, we could build a job description. We can summarize reviews. Everybody's doing that, and that's fine. Now, when we are thinking about more profound shifts to the platform, profound shifts to the experience, I do think there's some value in doing the good old-fashioned, test and learn and experimentation. And here, the thing that I just highlight is you do need to look at the hidden costs of doing this. As you build your product, there's a lot of hidden costs. There are different ways you store your data. There are different ways you curate your data. There are different ways you fine-tune your models. There are different ways you change your processes. And there's not enough conversation around that, and it's at least many of our peers, like, we're all saying, oh my God, what kind of bill are we going to have at the back end? And we need to be really, really, really smart about that. And not all things require the biggest and the largest and the most complex models. Some can be done with very targeted, well adapted, and there's plenty, by the way. Go to the model garden and play around and pick the right capability for the problem. I think that's where a lot of the effort needs to be. The last thing I'll say is, in terms of saving people's time, an unstructured knowledge worker, at the end of the day, it's task. That's different than people. And that's a different set of math that you need to do if you're replacing some task with innovation, automation, or a different way of doing. And people need to be very careful on how they do the math, because you do get, I agree with you on your 40%, there's some use case for some employees who are at a different point in their experience curve. You'll get 40%, I'm sure. There are others, it's exactly the wrong thing.
Interesting. Peter?
Yeah, I think, I agree with those points, and especially from what I would call sort of a personal productivity perspective. There are a lot of tricky variables to calculate that. But I think one of the things we see is on the business process side, calculating ROI hasn't changed very much with generative AI. It's the same sort of mentality you had before generative AI, which is, what are the business KPIs that we're impacting with this process? And now there's AI or generative AI in that process, but what's the impact? And so, and that varies from use case to use case. But to give two examples, we have one customer, Petrobras, which is the biggest oil and gas producer in Latin America. They applied a generative AI and automation workflow to do tax liability analysis on invoices against their tax code in Brazil. And they were able to realize $120 million in savings in a relatively short amount of time based on tax liability. Well, that's a huge cost savings. That's clear ROI. And so generative AI is a piece of that solution, but the overall process is what saved them that. And then, there's other examples like in the area of customer service, which I think is one of the most kind of ripe areas for opportunity when it comes to generative AI. We have use cases with ourselves, with other customers, where we're using generative AI to really speed up the response time to customers on issues. And so cutting that from 3 days to 1 day, reducing the handling time or time an agent has to work on that by up to 60%. And so those are clear metrics. Those are metrics customers were measuring before, and they're now, with generative AI, there's new use cases that are unlocked there, and customers are able to see the benefits of that.
It's fantastic. Oftentimes when disruption happens, we eventually come back to talking about culture. And so one of the things I'm curious from the three of you is really how can organizations create sustained success with the culture of innovation and learning and change? The pace, Hugo, you've mentioned as well, is so rapid. What are some of the lessons that you guys have learned in terms of helping that sustained success of continuous learning and change really and driving that adoption? What are some of the lessons Gen AI has taught you guys? Hugo, maybe we start with you.
A few things. We acquired many years ago a company called Great Place to Work. It's the company that does the certification and gives you, tips and tricks on how to make your organization better. They've got lots of data, and they've analyzed the performance over years and years and years. And one of the things that they found, to create a great culture, you need to create trust. It's pretty obvious, but there are different ways to create trust, and you go through the framework and all that. So we use that internally. Say, how do we build trust that Gen AI is going to be the right thing for our customers, the right thing for the employees, and the right thing for us? And we try to bring and create a participative environment. So we change all our hackathon to be all-company hackathon where everybody can do Gen AI. So we have legal people showing up to the party now, and there are tracks for them. It doesn't need to be as advanced. We created innovation environment in Google where you don't need to be as technical to be able to code. So now the marketing folks are translating stuff, and then they're discovering. And so that's a second one. The third, with Google again, we created 7 different learning track, and we told everybody, you have the opportunity to participate. We will support you. We want you to be reskilled and take advantage of this and ask yourself what it can do to your job. And we've invested in the senior leadership. Often people think the training is for the most junior folks. We made sure all the senior folks got the very basic training on Gen AI. So now when we have a leadership meeting, we all have the common understanding of what it is, what it's not at this moment in time. And we're having better conversation because of that.
That's great. Peter?
Yeah, to add to the learning element, which I think is critical, I would just say the other thing is just keeping flexibility and your options open in terms of architectures and technical decisions. We mentioned this earlier, with the technology changing so fast, you don't want to make any hard and fast decisions like we're only going to use this model or we're only going to use this vector DB or whatever it happens to be. You want to have a setup where you have an open architecture, you can work with different technologies, you can bring in new technologies, new models as they come out. And I think it's a tricky balance right now for a lot of technical teams where you don't want to get stuck in an analysis and experimentation loop where you're just, oh, the technology changed, I'm going to go and try this new model or do this, and you're never actually getting something out the door. But you do want to have a mindset and an architecture that is flexible. And so you get things out there, but then be ready to throw out a bunch of code that you wrote and do things differently if you see a new path in terms of what's the best way to do things.
Fantastic. Lars, how about OpenText?
I keep coming back to this concept. We are in the early phases of things, and we are very much a technology company. So that implies that this is a new toy, and so there's a very huge amount of people in our company, in my company OpenText, that wants to get their hands on, wants to use it. So it's not as much a matter of training and get people used to it. It's more a matter of controlling that we don't do it too fast, that we do it within an ESG framework that is sensible. So because we have people say, oh, it's so easy to summarize. I'll just send it to ChatGPT and get results back. But well, this is company confidential data. You can't do that. Stop, etc. Right? But on the other hand, we don't want to stop experimentation, right? So in this first phase, we want everybody to have ideas, to experiment, to have hackathons, we offer access to a lot of training courses, etc. So we can build up knowledge around it, but then still have these general frames for what is allowed and what is not allowed, and also have a lot of communication about where we're heading towards, so that people are saying, well, why don't we do this, and be frustrated about we're not doing it, saying, well, it's going to take 2 months more, right? Just have 2 months patience, then you will also have this kind of capability, right? So there is an internal roadmap of things we're doing, so people know that it is coming to a theater near you very soon.
Fantastic. We've talked a lot. We've talked about trust. We've talked about governance. We've talked about culture. I'd love to just kind of give everyone the floor to kind of talk about some final lessons learned from the 3 companies and really what you guys have learned. And really, this is a journey, right? This is not a moment in time, to your point, Lars. We're at the very beginning of this journey. And so maybe we start here with you, Peter. What are some of the final lessons learned from Automation Anywhere that you'd like to share?
Yeah. I think the one thing I'd say is, empower everyone in your organization to work with this technology, because you don't know where the next great idea and great innovation is going to come from. It may not be your traditional data science or ML teams who find that opportunity, especially with the pace of this technology, ubiquity of it, all the new approaches that are out there. And so I think that's an important thing for organizations as a whole, is to just empower everyone with this.
Fantastic. Hugo?
I'd go with data as the foundation. I think we make too often the assumption that the data is there, that it's in the right format, in the right quality, that it's accessible, that you can use it, and then you realize too far down the path that you need to go back to the beginning and do a few steps. So do invest time in getting your data foundation right.
Lars, how about you?
I think there is also an aspect that we learned, is that the future is not happening as fast as we think it is. So even though everybody is saying this is fundamental, it's happening in no time, the world today is completely different than a year ago. But then we go out and look at our customers consuming our solutions. Not really, right? So we are kind of embedding these AI solutions various places. You get your summarization, you get your help with creating test cases, or all the other kinds of use cases we have. But companies are still skeptical in consuming it. So we have to be very careful about thinking that, we're going to earn another $1 billion in selling these solutions, because the market is not necessarily fully ready for paying for it yet, right? So keep innovating, keep creating the solutions, but it will take some years before we are really just using these kind of solutions. It's not going to happen overnight, even though we all believe that, it already has happened. No, not really. Think about the web craze, the .com craze, right? It all happened overnight, but it took 5 years before it actually was really embedded in people's thinking.
Yeah, fantastic. So again, I just want to maybe wrap up and just thank Lars and Hugo and Peter. These 3 companies, OpenText, UKG, and Automation Anywhere, are some of the most forefront companies in terms of partnering with Google, but not just getting the vision out there, but actually putting that vision into production and getting these technologies in the hands of their users, their customers, our joint customers, quite frankly, through the use of their products. And that's really what we wanted to hit on today. So hopefully that was valuable for everyone. I want to thank you guys again for being here at Next and speaking. I want to thank everyone for your time. We've got really only a minute left, so I think maybe what we will probably do is just we can wrap up now, and then we'll be around here for a little bit to answer some questions. So thank you so much. Hope the rest of the day and the rest of the week is a valuable one, and have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.